Welcome to episode 526 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Nick Epley. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. At a time where nearly half of U.S. adults report feeling lonely, it's clear that many of us are craving connection. But does meaningful interaction always require deep conversations with close friends or family? Or can a brief exchange with a stranger on your commute make a difference? While I was speaking with Emily Casriel about her book, Deep Listening, which comes out in a couple days, she shared a powerful story about a spontaneous conversation with a stranger that had a lasting impact. And it had me reflecting on the work of Dr. Nick Epley and this episode. His research looks at the underestimated value of everyday interactions, and we had such a great chat about why you should, in fact, talk to strangers. And I knew it was the perfect refresh to get you in the mood for that episode with Emily, which, like I said, comes out in just a few days. So here's a little bit about Nick. He's a professor at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and the director of the Center for Decision Research. His work explores how we perceive others' minds and the barriers that prevent genuine connection. In this episode, he shares insights on how simple acts, like saying hello or offering a compliment, can significantly enhance our well-being and sense of belonging. Really quickly, before we get into the conversation, I want to be sure you know that there are links in the show notes from my top-related past episodes and books, ways to get in touch with Nick and myself, and more. It's all within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/526. Now let's jump right in. Dr. Nick Epley, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I feel like I should say welcome finally to...
Yeah. Yeah. Normally it's easy to hop on these sorts of calls and the world has been conspiring against me joining you, but I'm happy I'm finally here.
We made it happen.
Yeah,
it's important. Good. Yes. So I'm so glad that we battled through technology for you to be here. And I'm so glad that you are. For everyone who's not yet familiar with you, I feel like we're so entrenched now that we're best friends having been through this. But if share a little bit about yourself and your background for people who don't know you yet.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Epley. I'm a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And I'm not a technophobe, but we did have some issues getting this to work out. I do, though, believe in low-tech social interaction that actually involves really engaging with each other. And that's mostly what I study for a living, not so much how that kind of engagement helps people connect more effectively or be happier, healthier, but rather what we've been studying for the last decade or so is trying to understand why folks who are happier and healthier when they reach out and engage with each other, when they connect with each other, when they talk with each other, when they engage positively with each other, are sometimes so reluctant to do it. Sometimes avoid each other's in ways that might not be optimal for their own well-being.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And of course, I've been thinking about this a lot after reading the articles that you kindly sent over of some of places where your work's been featured. And I'm one that reaches out to people more often than most and still not even close to all the times I think about doing it. And it's been interesting in reading your work of all the points where you think you want to, but would just totally underestimate, the other person's going to think I'm weird, or they might wonder why I'm asking for them right now. And I'll just, put that off until later. But why? Why is that?
This connects with a more basic interest of mine that I've been focused on for my entire career, solidly in the mid 20-year mark by now. And that is, I study mind reading for a living. I study the kinds of inferences we make about each other's thoughts and beliefs and attitudes, and mostly how we screw this up and misunderstand each other. And there are a bunch of reasons why it's hard to accurately understand the mind of another person. chief among them is that's just a really hard problem. Another person's mind is the most complicated thing you'll ever think about. It's not surprising that we make mistakes, that we're imperfect at this, even though we are the most socially sophisticated primate on the planet as far as we can tell. But it's not just that it's a hard problem and we make mistakes. We don't really understand how another person thinks about something or how they feel about something. What's interesting to me is that there are also systematic mistakes, systematic gaps between our beliefs about someone else and reality. And if we can understand what those gaps are, we can understand why those gaps exist, then the hope, I think, is that we as psychologists have an opportunity to close those gaps and make people wiser. So it's not that you would want to reach out and engage with everybody all the time whenever you could have thought about it. You should reach out when it's optimal to do so. And I think people are suboptimal in that regard.
So how would we define that it's, what's optimal? I'm assuming that's not the same for everyone in every situation and every encounter.
Well, what's interesting, we'll get into this about how much this varies across people. It's easy to have beliefs, or it's easy to have intuitions that connecting with other people, social interaction is more positive for some than for others. I don't think the data actually support that. But by optimal, I think we mean in ways that give you as much positive affect and as least negative affect as you can without incurring other costs. So in general, the way we're thinking about optimal here is in maximizing your well-being. And by well-being, we typically mean kind of two different dimensions that are often closely aligned. One are the momentary feelings and emotions you have. So is this a positive, am I happy at what I'm doing right now, right? And we do lots of things that don't make us happy because we know they're good for us. But still, are we feeling good about what we're doing now and not sad or miserable about what we're doing now? And second is, are we satisfied with the life we're living now? And I think the data from around the world are just crystal clear in documenting that the quality of our social relationships is a critical determinant for our happiness, probably the most important. Other people are the single biggest source of our happiness as well as our misery. And so when we reach out to other people in ways that are rewarding and can do that as often as it would be rewarding, we'd be likely to live better lives. And if we're avoiding opportunities that we could take easily, right, not hard, that are positive, then we're missing chances to increase the quality of our lives. And I think the quality of others' lives too.
Yeah, definitely. It is such an interesting conundrum is the word that I will use here. But that, we know in general, when someone reaches out to us out of the blue, I think overwhelmingly just think, oh, that's so nice. It's so great
lovely.
that so great to hear from them. It's been such a long time. Delightful.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
When we think about reaching out to someone else and it's been a long time, all the weirdness, like why don't we?
Yeah. Are they going to be interested? It's going to be weird.
Yeah. They're going to think I have some ulterior motive or, they don't want to hear from me. They're going to be mad that I haven't talked to them in such a long time. I find it so funny. So there are people, you get the messages that say something like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I haven't talked to you. I know you're going to be upset, and it's like, hey, I'm not mad. I'm glad to hear from you now. Who cares, right? About that other thing. That doesn't matter. There's also this reminds me of some of the conversation having, I think, with Vanessa Bonds when she was on the show. And there's this kind of that spotlight effect and everything. And where you say the people that make the grand announcement that they're going to be stepping away from Facebook or something for a while, right? We think everyone is paying so much attention to us. And even though we don't sit and look at other people and go, they haven't checked in a while. We feel like right. Everyone's really monitoring us. Do you have any thoughts or anything you can share on this kind of weird disparity?
So one of the big barriers that we find to people being more social in their daily lives is that they underestimate how social others are. So the way to think about social interaction is there's some choice moment typically for us where we have to decide, am I going to engage with you or not? Person sits down next to you on a train. You have to decide, are we going to talk or am I going to keep to myself? Once you're talking, you have to decide, well, are we going to go deep here and have a meaningful conversation, or am I going to just stay on the shallow end and talk about the weather, right? A kind thought comes to your mind. You have to think about, do I share that with this person, or do I hold it back? You feel grateful to somebody. Do you express it and share your appreciation with this person or not? You're thinking about somebody you'd like to reconnect with. You haven't talked to them in a while. You want to reach back out to them. Do you do this or not? On and on and on. You need some help. Do I ask for help when I need it, right? All of these social interactions are preceded by a moment where you're making a choice about doing this. And in these moments, there's an obvious risk-reward trade-off that you're dealing with. Other people are risky, right? They're risky. And we have to decide whether the benefit outweighs the cost. And when you're ever in a situation like this, you've got two things pulling at you. You've got an approach-oriented tendency, right? The benefit of reaching out. But then you've also got avoidance-oriented fears, right? Things that, reasons to make you nervous about doing this, right? And I think what our data suggest is that we get that risk-reward trade-off with other people wrong. We mismanagement such that we think that it's going to be less positive. It's riskier to reach out and engage with someone than it actually is. And the bulk of that risk, I think, or a good chunk of it, comes from thinking that other people just aren't as interested in engaging with us as we actually are. Somebody sits down. Well, I'll just tell you a story from Monday, earlier this week. I was walking downtown to go and give a talk downtown. Guy walks up next to me. We're on the sidewalk. Somebody's coming down the road on a bicycle, has a really bright, like strobe light on the front, the kind that would send you into a coma if you had, some sort of sensitivity to light. And I just turned to this guy and I mentioned this thing, but he had his headphones in. If I had noticed that, I never would have said hello to him, never would have commented to him, but he took him out right away and then was happy to talk, right? But he wasn't, when I looked at him, he wasn't suggesting he was interested, even though I was happy to talk. When I looked at him, he didn't seem so interested. It wasn't obvious. And as a result, I would have been hesitant. But because I didn't notice that, I was happy to engage. Then we had a lovely conversation for like a block and a half before I realized I was a block beyond where I needed to turn. But failing to realize that other people are social, they're not always showing us that, is something that's a barrier to us. I mean, you're happy to talk to a friend who you know is happy to talk to you, right? So there are times when we do this. But it's in those cases where there's some uncertainty. How's the person going to respond? Do they really want to talk? Where we underestimate how positive those interactions are going to go.
Yeah. Well, and that's like you talk about how hard it is to make friends as an adult, and we kind of forget that, I'm forced to make friends. My husband, so I have he's now officially 16 months. I have a 16-month-old. And so my husband and I are eyeing all the other kids and their parents at the daycare to see so who are we going to be stuck being friends with? And do we want to be scoping out and trying to pick the best of the parents here, to nudge Hudson to go play with because their parents look like ones that we might want to talk to. But I think we underestimate, how you even make friends these days. When we were kids, it was so much easier to start up conversations and make friends. And so, yeah, I don't know. We get what happens.
I don't think it was easier. I think it's just as easy now. It's just we don't do it so much. And I do think even years ago, there's always been some element of anxiety about interacting with others. Now we have tools, technology that we sometimes use as a substitute for interacting with others. That's not quite as rewarding. But in principle, it's not any harder to connect with other people now than it's always been. You can still talk to the parents of your kids' friends in person with your face, right? Making the sounds that come out of our mouths. All of that equipment still works just as well as it ever did, even if we don't use it as much as perhaps we ought to.
Yeah, we have those. Yeah, I think perhaps maybe it's more mental barriers, and you can have more ridiculous conversations with yourself. We like to think we're different than other people. I'm sure other people do this just as much as I do, but you play out the conversation in your brain. Like, if I was to say this, then they might say this, and that would be weird. Or I say that, and then what if I did this? And then, you spend 10 minutes having a conversation with yourself and no one else. And that's not rewarding either.
No. One of the common things that we find, just if we just stick to something simple, like having a conversation with a stranger, one of the common things that we find is that people are often surprised at how much they learn, right? So that's one thing that we fail to see. They're surprised by how enjoyable the conversation is. And they are also surprised by how much they have in common with the other person, right? Now, notice when you just look at somebody, they don't show you anything that they might have in common with you, right? Unless you're wearing, like your alma mater's sweatshirt or something, and they happen to be wearing the same thing. There just are not that many signals to the things. You can't look at somebody and guess that they grew up in the same town that you did, or happen to know a friend that you have in common, or, hey, they like to go roller skating too, or whatever it is. You can't always tell that. But conversation has a particular quality to it that generally makes them very rewarding and enjoyable that people don't seem to anticipate. And that is that they do elicit interest, and they also elicit similarity. So conversations have kind of a magnetic quality to them. You go back and forth, you reciprocate. There's a kind of cooperative element to it. That's the very nature of conversation. That's the very nature of almost all social exchange. I reached out to you, you reach back to me. That's the way it works. Reciprocity governs almost all social interaction. But conversation also has a unique quality to it in that you don't talk about anything and everything you could talk about. Like here, you and I are not, we could talk about, the range of things we could possibly talk about is massive. Of course, the things we actually talk about are the things we have in common to talk about. And conversation with a stranger in particular very quickly starts to go down that road and find those things you have in common with that person, right? We sometimes think of, friendship or as something that's really rare, right? Or you're going to sit down and have a conversation with somebody and you're not sure what you're going to talk about. Like, I don't know you at all. What are we going to discuss? Right? It's like a needle in a haystack to find what you and I have in common. But conversation is like searching for a needle in a haystack with a magnet. It pulls for it because, of course, I said, hey, I grew up in Iowa. Oh, I'm an Iowan too. Or I know so-and-so. Really? That was my neighbor. And, off you go. It's got a magnetic quality to it that draws people together, that surprises people, catches people off guard.
Yeah. And I know and you're alluding to some of it here. And I know from, reading some of the papers, and you talked about this a little bit, but it's not just, do we have just the surface level conversation, or do we have the deeper level conversation? And we assume that the other person probably doesn't, like, they don't know me. They don't want to have this deeper conversation. So I'm just not even going to do that. But most people are open to that. We like it better. We feel better after the fact. And there is a lot of value to just, jumping in with some of those deeper types of questions or points of conversation. Do you have tips for people of the types of conversations to have?
Yeah. So I would say that our experiments that we've run on relatively shallow or deep conversation don't always indicate that deeper conversations are wildly better than shallower ones. In fact, people really kind of like just conversations when they just talk about whatever. They enjoy those too, and they often get deeper as you talk to somebody for longer. But when people have both of these kinds of conversations, they do like the one that was deeper more than the one that was shallower when they have both of them. Even though they think going in, no, they'll prefer the shallower one and the deeper one is going to be too much here. So I think what our data suggests is that, if you don't like small talk, stop having it. It's okay. You don't need a long runway to do this. Person sits down next to you on the train, like I had somebody do here just yesterday morning. Person sits down to you next on the train. You ask them, where they work. I tell you, I'm in computer support downtown. You can ask them, is that the job you always wanted to have? And right there, now you're in meaningful conversation. Now you're learning something about what this person really wanted out of it. And they are happy to respond. When you take an interest in other people, they reveal interesting stuff and take an interest in you. And how can that conversation not be better? So are there secrets to doing this? What do you talk about? What do you say? When we run experiments on this, we do give people questions to discuss. So we pull from a procedure in social psychology that's become a little bit famous called the Fast Friends procedure, thanks to an op-ed in the New York Times, which is how everything becomes famous as far as I can tell from psychology. But, we adapt these a little bit. The deep conversations that we have involve questions that require you to reveal meaningful stuff about you. And we start right in. The Fast Friend procedure has 36 to 30, it depends what you're doing. It has a lot of questions that start out really shallow and go deep. You don't need to fiddle with that. You can jump right into the deep pool. Questions like, if I was going to become a good friend of yours, what would be important for me to know about you? What are you most grateful for in your life? Tell me about it. Can you tell me about one of the last times you cried in front of another person? And people just start right into those. But I don't think there's anything magical about those particular questions. What those questions do is they require you to be interested in another person and reveal interesting things about yourself. So I think, that the tip that I give people here, and we're just now starting to run experiments that looks at what happens when people actually follow these instructions, is to just take an interest in another person. That's how you have a good conversation. You be interested in them. And if you are interested in them, you will ask them questions that are interesting to you and likely interesting and in general, and that conversation is going to go well. What you talk about is going to vary from one person to another. Every conversation is different. But if you change your mindset about this interaction so that you're more social yourself, more interested in the other person, I think that's what's going to make it a lot better. That's how you have a deep conversation.
Yeah, definitely. The 36-ish questions I featured recently. I did an episode on vulnerability loops, which I'm going to have be the top recommended next episode for everyone in the show notes from this, because I think it's really closely, tied in here. And you have to put yourself, out on the ledge a little bit, or you like it says in that paper, you're willing to jump and know that the land of trust is going to manifest beneath your feet, right? That you're going to have that better connection if you're willing to speak first, to ask the question first, to share a little bit about yourself, go into that kind of territory a little bit. And then you can just have those better connections and conversations. And I really like that the statement about the train, like you said, the person said they were in IT support, and the question that you ask there is so slightly different than what most people ask, right? Yeah. So, but it's meaningfully different in where the conversation ends up going. It makes the person stop a little bit and go, because you don't typically get asked that. So you don't have that default response. So instead of like, I'm in IT support. Oh, where do you work? Would be the
right. Yeah.
common type of question.
As if that matters, right?
Yeah, cool, right? Or, my brother's in IT support, and then you start talking about you.
Yeah, if you care about somebody, then you ask them questions that matter to them. And that just, I think, then starts to come naturally. And I think what our research suggests is that people are overly reluctant to do that, to adopt that approach to interacting with other people, to actually treat other people like they are friends, good friends, because they don't think the other person's going to appreciate it.
Yeah. But research shows that that's wrong, right? They do
Way
appreciate
wrong.
it. Yeah.
Way wrong. Yeah. The effects are, so I often run experiments and talks that I give. I did this yesterday and I did it on Monday in downtown Chicago. We're talking on Thursday for whatever it's worth, whenever this gets posted or listened to. We're talking on Thursday. So just yesterday and 3 days ago. And I give when I give a talk on undersociality, which is the stuff that we're talking about, people's tendency to be overly reluctant to reach out and engage with others, I will run a deep talk demonstration where I pair people up randomly and have them discuss a few meaningful questions with each other. And I have them report how they expect it's going to go, how awkward it's going to be, how much they're going to enjoy the conversation, how much they're going to like their partner. And then when they're done, I have them report how they actually felt about it. Normally, when you're a psychologist and you're running an experiment out there in the world, you're a little nervous about how it's going to go because, a lot of, effects vary a lot by context here or there, whatever, depending on the day and who you're doing it with or whatever, right? There's some noise in it. And our effects aren't always so big. These are just crushing. When people imagine having a meaningful conversation with a stranger, they think the other person's not going to want to hear it or care about it. And when they get into it and they open up to each other, it just goes well. Not always, but generally way better than people expect. And it is extremely robust effect. Extremely.
Yeah. Well, as we tie this into the business aspect of things, for anybody who's listening and maybe says, oh yeah, that's great for individual people, but that's not a company problem. It's not our job to be manifesting these relationships. And, managers and employees shouldn't be treating each other as if they're good friends because there's a job to be done. What would you say to those people?
So I would say two things. First off, there is a job to be done, but you got to want to do that job. And feeling good about where you're at, feeling connected to the place, liking your colleagues and coworkers, being willing to engage with them, feeling happy when you're at work is critical for wanting to do your job, period. The second thing I would say is that this matters a lot for the culture of the place that you are at. So most businesses thrive when people are feeling good, when they're open and honest with each other, when they're willing to share information with each other, right? When they're willing to engage with each other, they actually learn from each other. And they wither and die when people sit alone in their own silos. They're not creative, they're not engaged, it increases the likelihood they behave unethically when they're not engaging with each other so much. And so I think having a culture where people are open and honest and willing to engage and connect with each other, they feel connected to the place because they're connected to each other, is the kind of culture that every organization wants to have. And it's the kind of culture that helps get the job done wherever you are.
Yeah. And I feel like I keep bringing this up, this particular piece of research. And I don't know, it's like, is it top of mind for me? Is it related to what we're talking about? Is it the type of conversations I'm having? But the research showing that people that have a best friend at work, that say they have a best friend, are more likely to be engaged and loyal with the organization. They're more likely to stay. They do better work. They're happier. And so you can do some stuff to help people have friends at work. And it doesn't have to it shouldn't just be like mandatory Zoom happy hours because nobody wants that.
So I'll tell you that here at the University of Chicago in our business school at Booth, in the opening week of the MBA program here, the MBA students in orientation go through a session with me where I have them have a deep conversation. And we do this as part of, depends on the year, whether it's an hour and a half session with me or a 3-hour session with me. But we do this as part of an orientation session on culture. And the point I make to the students is that here at the University of Chicago, we're trying to figure out what's right and what's true. And that's our job. That's what it means to be here as a student or as a faculty member. And in order to do that, we've got to be able to be open and honest and real with each other, able to have hard conversations, able to talk honestly with people. And we're going to get started doing that right now. And I make the point that people shouldn't let their own mind be a barrier to having the kind of culture that that we want. Other people appreciate it when you reach out and engage with them. So I think under sociality, people's reluctance to reach out and engage with others, those psychological barriers that keep us from being connected to each other, are exactly the kind of barriers that organizations would want to get rid of, both to increase people's connection at work, but also to help them do the things that they need to get done at work, which often involve interacting with other people, sharing ideas, remembering who knows what, being willing to reach out and ask for help when you need it, all of that important stuff, feeling comfortable to blow the whistle if you see something bad happening, right? That could avert disaster within an organization. Having that kind of culture is the one organizations want. So I think this is deeply important at work.
I 1,000% agree. And so I know you were joking a little bit with me about how, if you ever get your act together, that this topic is what your next book will be about. This thing right here that you just said, that's the book. Like, go write that book. Of the how to go do this at work and how you can use that to have better organizations and people will love that. I guarantee.
That may be my follow-up book or my
That's book 3. That's coming.
8 chapters. Yeah. We'll see. I do think this. So I'm a psychologist at a business school who never thought I would be at a business school. There are lots of us here at the University of Chicago who are like that. And I don't particularly care about business in a unique way. The stuff that we have to tell our MBA students, or the things that basic psychology has to teach folks in business, is the same thing that we have to teach people in their everyday lives, right? The brain you carry with you to work is no different from the one that you have at home or on vacation or anywhere else, right? So it's bigger than that. But you're right that there are certainly a lot of practical implications to that particular domain of being at the office. They work for you at home too. I often have students in my class who tell me, I teach an ethics class called Designing a Good Life, who tell me this is really good for work, really good for business, and what I want to do in my career. But I really learned a lot about my family, like how to be a mom or how to be a dad, right?
Yeah.
So there's that.
All related for sure. Yeah. So to dig in on that business side a little bit more, where for someone who does want to build this out as a culture, to have a team that's going to be more likely to be better connected and have all the value that you're talking about, that they get to be better individuals and helping to lift the team as a result as well, and building that great culture. Do you have advice about, like you said, when the MBA students, you do either 90 minutes or 3 hours, one time at the beginning, with an organization, is there a bit of at an orientation, or you do something once a quarter, or you pair people up with random people once a month that they have to go meet up with and have a conversation? What if it's a virtual culture? Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah. So I think what you're wanting to think about, what you're wanting to think about is how to do 2 things. One is to change the way people are interpreting what they're doing and what they're about. So this is what happens at the orientation session, I hope, for our MBA students at Booth, is we are giving them very explicitly a description of what it means to be a Booth student, what it means to be at the University of Chicago. What that means is to be open and honest and connected with each other, not to be a mathematician or a quant junk of some kind. It's not that. It's about being open and honest and real with each other. That's what it means. That alters construal. You do that at the beginning. So if you're bringing people into your organization, think about interviewing with this part of your culture very much in mind. Interviewing, for instance, is really, we often think about it as an opportunity to select people for our organization. We're not so great at doing that. But what it really is good for is indoctrinating people. Telling them this is what we're about. This is what we're here for. This is what we do. This is what we're like. And so making sure that people have that construal. This is a place where we're open and honest with each other, where we connect with each other, where this is expected and appropriate. We're a nice, decent place to work where people are sociable. Having that up front is important and good. But the second thing you want to think about are seeding these practices. So none of this social stuff happens because you think about it. That is, you might one time remember this conversation we had and then you go off and do it. But when it really happens and when it really becomes a part of your daily life is when it becomes a habit. You're not really thinking about it. It just becomes a practice that you do over and over and over again. And the way you get, behavior change to work is you get it started. Started doing something routine and fairly easy and fairly common. So if you are a manager in an organization, you want your folks to be better connected. Make sure you have weekly lunches where you actually do this, right? Where it's routine. Start your meetings by asking folks, somebody tell me what they're grateful for, right? Let's hear what we got today. Or start a meeting by, somebody sharing what they need help with. Tell me where's a need? Can somebody meet this thing? Make it a habit in those meetings, those regular practices. Make sure that you've got maybe a Friday lunch where you get together and do this. If you're on Zoom, have an interactive coffee hour. So the Swedes are ahead of the rest of the world on this. They have a habit that they refer to as fika, which is a social coffee hour. They have, in Swedish organizations, Swedish. So Volvo, IKEA, those places, they have regular coffee breaks for everyone in the organization. That is the idea. But it's not just where you go down and get coffee. It's coffee with conversation. That's the idea of fika. You sit down and you engage with each other. And that's just a part of their day. That's just a part of their daily life. Like it's like getting up, putting your shoes on. 10:30, this is what we do here. So when you make these activities routine and common and easy and just part of the habit, so people aren't thinking about it, you've just designed the situations or the context so that they happen this way. That's how you get them to spread through an organization. And that's how you sustain them.
I love that. I was giving a talk for a company recently. My new book's about change management and working with teams. And someone was talking about their working from home and then having to change and be coming back into the office and how you're wanting to talk to all the people, but then you end up just talking to everybody all day and you're not getting anything done when you're in the office. And do they want to talk to me? A lot of this stuff coming up with it. And, my recommendation to her, I was saying is, you want to be taking advantage, there are things you can do when you're in person that you can't do elsewhere. And if you make sure that you have dedicated time for that when you're in the office, there's value to welcoming people that are new faces. And where she said she's been there for a long time and you can see like, hey, I've never met you. We should talk. Like, it's good to help those people to feel like they're valued and part of the organization. You should do that. But if you just let it control your whole life, and you're just at the whim of you seeing somebody and like, I must get up now, that's probably not great for things either. But this idea of a dedicated time, and a company could very easily say, like you said, at 10:30 here, no one has another meeting that's anything other than this. We're having a coffee chat time, and it's not your time to go, have coffee by yourself at home or whatever. And if you don't have someone to talk to, if you're virtual, you can like get randomly assigned someone or something. There's like an app that would pop up like, this is your conversation partner of the day. And you get put in there, and there are some question prompts if you want them, or you can just say, hey, how are you? And go from there. I think that's such a great way to help use technology and, people that are in the office, and you can be able to set that up and have it be structured but it doesn't feel like structured, but it's like a nice brain break and value in conversation.
Yep. Just routine, something that's habitual. Not all the time, right? Interruptions can't come at all random times. That's a problem.
Right. It's not like wait for the pop-up and then everybody has to drop what you're doing for random social hour. That's probably not going to go over well.
Right. I think often in organizations, people don't do these sorts of activities that they kind of know would be good for everybody. Not because they can't imagine that it would be good. It's just that they just don't choose to make it a priority. If you choose to make it a priority, you would then start to think about, well, how do I create these opportunities in the organization? They're not too costly, right? So you want to maximize their value, which means minimizing the cost and maximizing the reward. making it a habit that's easy to do, that other people see and can reciprocate. That's how you do this.
I love it. Well, the last thing that I was really thinking about that came to mind for me here is social media and how it's not quite social for most people. It's more bullhorn, like, blasting about yourself, not asking engaging conversations. If you do, the passive of a like or whatnot. But I think social media does have the capacity to fill some of the void for people that aren't, getting out and meeting people if it's done right. Do you have thoughts or tips on how someone who wants to be able to connect better with others and they're looking to do that on social media, what might they try?
Yeah. So I think the cost, so technology is a tool and we can use it well or use it poorly. Using it well, using it wisely requires knowing what it's good for and what it's not good for. It's often not good for the things that we use it for, like trying to make conversation or learn from people or understand their beliefs. That just isn't very helpful. Typing to each other doesn't communicate that much about what people are actually thinking or how they're feeling about something. So using technology for what it's good for is a value. What we find in our own work is that when you're interacting with someone, if you're trying to connect with somebody, typing at them is not so helpful. People think it's going to be weird to call folks out of the blue and talk, and it turns out it's not when you do it. And people feel more connected when they talk to each other. They also the other person seems more mindful, more thoughtful and intelligent, more human-like. The voice is humanizing. We find in our research whereas typing to each other, text itself, just the words, they lack the emotion and the mind, the thinking behind those words that you get from a person's voice. You can tell, for instance, that I feel strongly about something by how I sound. And you can tell when I'm thinking about something by how long I pause. You can hear my mind working when we talk, and that's what connects you with another person. That's what makes you feel connected to another person. That you're connected to their mind. And that comes through their voice. And technology allows us to do that, right? Like we're doing right now, talking to each other. I can hear you. You can hear me. And so I think we can use technology more wisely, use it to talk with each other more than to type with each other, use it more for active engagement than for passive scrolling and just looking at things. Social media, that doesn't create a whole lot of connection. But using it in an active way that allows you to use your voice, you can connect with people around the world that way. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that. And I think that I'm very hopeful that a lot of people are going to be making a connection today, right? So as we close this out, I guess, would be if you were going to give someone one tip of something they can go do today and to build their habits in this way, what should they start doing? What's a simple thing to start doing right away?
I would say two things. Both involve kind words. One is share kind thoughts with other people. We find in our work that people report withholding 36%, they told us on average in this survey. About a third of the compliments that come to their mind, they report withholding.
I bet it's more than that. That seems low.
It may be. But stop doing that.
Yeah.
When you think something nice about somebody, when you feel good about somebody, they probably don't know it, and it feels great for them to hear it. So start sharing that. Just be more open. I think you're great. I really appreciate you. Love your podcast. Appreciate the work you do. My colleague thinks you're terrific. Ayala Fishbuck, who's been on your show before, right? You have these kind thoughts you can share. Why are you holding them back? That's not wise. The other thing that you can do, I think, on almost any given day, this is particularly if you're having kind of a crummy day, I think without question, one of the most positive things you can do, at least by yourself, is to think about somebody who you feel grateful to and write them a note. That's easy to do. Very powerful. And then there's one other thing that I would suggest too, I guess, which is to try to connect with a stranger, talk to somebody. Our effects on people's happiness before and after having a conversation are some of the biggest positive activity interventions that field's ever seen, I think. Perhaps some of the most robust. That when you have a conversation with somebody, including a stranger, maybe even especially a stranger, that's just really good. It's not hard to do, but it's a habit you can pick up. Say hello. Ask somebody how their day is going. Find out, about somebody else. That's going to be way more rewarding and positive than you think it will be. That's easy to do often.
I love it. Wonderful advice. Easy to do if you focus on it, easy to forget if we don't. So that's where it's important to take the initiative, do the thing. It's easy. It's worth it. Go. So we'll let people go do that right now.
You don't have to believe me or you on this. You can go out and try this. Yeah, just do it. You'll find out.
Yeah. Easy. Perfect. Well, we'll have links for people to learn more about you. We didn't even begin to scratch the surface on your first book on MindWise, but it'll be linked in the show notes for everyone as well. And some information on, where they can learn more about you at the Booth School of Business. Is there anywhere else where we should be sending people if they wanted to get in contact and learn more?
So I study social connection for a living, which means I don't use social media, I'm afraid. So you can't follow me anywhere, but you can find everything I've ever written that I would care for you to read on my website. You just Google my name, Nick Epley, you'll find it.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to link it. We'll make it even easier. And for everyone who has nice, kind thoughts, I'm sure you can find, academic emails are easy to find to send a nice email to Nick, since you can't connect with him on the socials to tell him how you feel. So.
On the non-socials, the anti-socials. Yeah.
Yes.
I love getting emails. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Nick. It was so much fun to talk with you. And I look forward to the next, we'll do a coffee chat, maybe in person next time I make it to Chicago.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again to Dr. Nick Epley for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, it's the realization that we often overlook the profound impact of simple, everyday interactions. Loneliness is now being referred to as an epidemic. An article in the Science Survey says that while loneliness was once considered only a personal affliction, it's now likened to a public health epidemic, exhibiting consequences as dire as smoking or obesity. In a time where nearly half of people in the U.S. say they feel lonely, these brief moments of connection, like chatting with a barista or greeting a neighbor, can play a crucial role in enhancing your own well-being and the well-being of those around you. It's a little gift you can be giving to yourself and others every day. It just takes a couple minutes, so worth it. One thing that really stuck with me from this conversation is how inaccurate our predictions are about these interactions. Nick's research shows that we tend to assume they're going to be awkward or unwanted, but in reality, people are almost always glad we said something. That disconnect between what we think will happen and what actually does can keep us from reaching out, meaning both people miss out on the benefits. This conversation is a perfect reminder that connection doesn't always require hours of deep talk, and that we can all benefit from being better listeners. As you'll hear in my conversation with Emily Casriel, which goes live in a couple days, a small moment, a kind word, a brief exchange, these matter too. You don't have to wait for the right moment to start building connections and deeply listening. Just start, ask a question, see what opens up. And with that in mind, let's start a conversation on social media. I'm curious, have you had a small, surprising chat lately that brightened your day and interaction? Or maybe you're thinking of someone who you should reach out to just because. I'd love to hear about it. Come share it with me there on social media. You'll find me as the Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere, and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. There are links in the show notes to make it easy, as well as links for my top related past episodes and books, ways to get in touch, and more. It's all waiting for you in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/526. And thank you again to Dr. Nick Epley for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Join me Thursday when I sit down with Emily Casriel to discuss her book, Deep Listening. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.